Good morning.
Good morning.
And who's got a mug? I've got a Matt Hylick from Baltimore Clay Works. Water.
Here's my mug. I have that same Jerry Bennett mug that I always have every morning.
I have a Marcia Dowson mug. That's me.
Very nice. I know, Marcia, every week you have a different one of your mugs. I love it.
I know I have lots of them.
I'm sure.
I'm drinking out of Paul Eshelman's work. It's nice
Oh.
lid.
I haven't seen that. Oh, that's great.
Gina's going to give us a tour and show us her work. And we do have a collection of her work for sale through Peters Valley Gallery. We'll put a link in the chat. And we're also going to give you a special coupon for 10% off any purchases through the gallery for joining us. And so I'll turn it over to Gina, who's joining us all the way from Chicago. And it's a lot earlier there. Well, only an hour, right? It's not that much.
Thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to my studio. For those of you who I have not met in person, I am Gina Pannorfi. I am a felt maker and a batik artist, and I have been working in my business for about 17 years full time. So I have been felting that long, and within the last 3 years, I kind of have doubled back to an old passion of mine, which is painting, but through a traditional wax batik. And so I've created a collection of scarves, and then in turn that's kind of evolved into a line of clothing. So some shirts and tops, and then dresses as well. So I give you a little bit of a background. I am originally born and raised on the East Coast in New Jersey, where I grew up, and then I moved to Chicago to go to the School of the Art Institute here, and minus some time abroad in Italy. I've lived in Chicago for over 20 years. So it is my home, and I live here with my husband, who is also an artist, and I've lived in this current studio for about 12 years. So I will, with that said, I could kind of give you a little bit of a background to what's behind me. I'm sitting at my working desk, and then to the where you see those pots, there is a dye station, and then behind me there I have kind of a dry stocking and working table, and then you get a little bit of sense here of the white tables that I have. I will give you a different angle in a minute, but this is for the laying out of my felt work. And then you kind of get a sense that I am organized with a lot of plastic drawers filled with silk. So I do hand dye all of my work, and that's where it starts with the felt making. And then let's see, I can kind of move from here because it'll be a little bit more interactive if I get up. So I'm gonna just turn this audio off and then switch you guys to the other audio. So bear with me for just a second. So this is, I'm going to turn you guys this way. So here you can see that behind me, I have concrete floors in my studio. When I moved in here, I had drains put in because I do wet felt everything that I make. So it requires quite a bit of soap and water. And then behind me there, I'm working, those large frames are actually for the batiking. And then this is, here's more of where I'm actually laying out all of my silk and wool on these tables. Behind me there is a large collection of fine merino wool that I do purchase dyed. And then I'll give you a little further kind of rotation here and get a full scope. More of my work table. This is my cutting table that this big rainbow piece is on. And then over there where there's that little stove, that's my dye stove. And then my dye station is kind of continued off to the left there where my laundry room is. I do live here with my husband as well, so not in the studio, but next door in an apartment. If anybody has any questions just kind of about the space, I'm going to kind of move on to explaining more about my work. So I don't know if there's anything that anyone would like to know about specifics to the studio itself, but I have different kind of schedules, I do work morning to night and then usually take breaks intermittently during the day. So I will either, back when things were open, I would, go swimming in the morning, work all through the day, and then break for lunch and dinner, and then actually go back to work afterward as well. I mean, after dinner as well, I would go back to work because I live here and I am a little bit of a night owl. So I like to be productive at night. It's nice and quiet in my studio because I do live in a city and I am sort of right up on the street. And so it's very peaceful in my studio at night. Okay, so I can also, what I'm going to do is talk about my felt work first. So here is the most narrow of my styles that I work in. This is all silk that is undyed and then merged with fine merino wool. So you can see here, I'm creating this very subtle texture. And then this style can be worn easily, just draped down here, the ruffles up, and then you can also wrap it around to give you a little bit of.
Do you want to explain? I don't know if everybody is familiar with the felting process. But I know on some of like the large pieces you talk about how like you then have to shrink them later. Like there's a whole process to get it to that point where you kind of see the silk parts coming through. And can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do is I'm going to spin you back over to my work table. So give you guys a little bit of a. Try not to move too quickly because I don't want to make anybody sick. Okay, so for example, what I do is I dye the silk, and that usually takes 1 to 2 days for a piece of silk to be ready. And then what I'm doing is I am taking this silk and laying it out flat on my table. So I spread this out on a large sheet of bubble wrap, because that is, so for felt making, what you need, for wet felt making, what you need is a textured surface, some sort of friction, some sort of lubricant for the fiber, and then you need pressure. So what I use is bubble wrap, a very friendly, eco-friendly laundry detergent, which I find rinses out of the work really nicely. And I use soap and water, and then just the force of my body actually for felt making. So I do everything by rolling, and I do all that by hand. So what happens is I take this silk, I lay it flat. You can see here, this is a pretty sheer piece of silk. And then I choose the wool colors behind me. And then what I do is with wool roving, there's different staple lengths with wool. So when you pull off the hair, you get what is called the staple length of the hair. So then I take this and I blend it with other colors, and then I spread it out on the surface of the silk. And then what I do is I take soap and water, sprinkle it on top, put another sheet of bubble wrap on top of that. And so there's sort of like layers of a sandwich. And then I roll that up around a dowel. And then I basically roll that dowel back and forth under weight. And that allows the wool to do its thing, and it naturally integrates with other pieces of wool, and then will also integrate with any other natural fiber. So silk, it's working its way actually into the weave, the substrate of the silk, and then attaches to the surface. So there's a point where when you're felt making, the hairs start to kind of lock together. And at that point is where you can decide, you can either keep rolling it.
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
That was my dog barking. I'm just gonna mute myself.
Oh. Sorry, I can't even hear you. I don't know what is going on with my phone. So anyway, what happens is at that point in the process, I stop, and then I take the piece and then I sort of manipulate it by hand. And then I then further shrink the piece in alternate baths of hot and cold water. And people who felt will do this to a certain degree. Some people don't do it at all. And so if you're familiar with Nuno felting and laminated felting, you can see that there is a degree to everybody's work where the fibers are either very lightly put on the surface or very densely packed. I am, as I've felted over the years, I like to call it integrity in felting. And so I'm making sure that there is absolutely no visual direction of the fibers, how they were laid down on the surface. And I find that what that does is it creates a textile that will not pill as much as a textile that is not fulled completely, and also something that you can take care of and that you won't get a reaction to. And then in some cases, some people's work will actually detach or fall apart if it's not actually fulled to a point where it is integral. But again, it's a personal choice, it's an aesthetic choice, it's also a choice for weight. Sometimes when things are too densely felted, they're too heavy to wear, or you know, depending on your personal taste, kind of different, there's different different preferences. So does that give you a general kind of understanding to what the actual felt making process is? If anybody has any questions about that.
And I love, like you were saying earlier, and you'll show us, you know, in these pieces that you show us, like that idea of painting and how you're kind of pulling apart the fibers, like with these different colors, right? So I know, like, I'm a painter, right? And I'm like, ooh, I want like a little bit of this color and a little bit of that, and you can just pull them in. And I think that's what really makes your work so beautiful and vibrant, is like that, like, aspect of it.
Thank you. I actually have, when I first went to school, I think like most of us who are introduced to art and art making, painting was my first love. And I, at the Art Institute, I kind of went from painting to printmaking. And that is where I went into fiber art, because I went from screen printing on paper to screen printing on fabric, and then devolved through the fiber department, or learning weaving and batiking. And I mean, I've been batiking since I was a child, but the, you know, the joining of, the fact that, you know, you're referencing painting, is I do feel that surface design in general is very painterly. Obviously with the digitization of art, things change, but there is still that surface, color, you know, all the things that painting and design kind of integrate with each other. So yeah, it's definitely painterly. It feels painterly.
Yeah, well, and then with the batik, right, you literally are painting.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I can explain. I'm going to go back to showing you some felt work first.
Yeah.
And then I'll go into the batik process explanation, just because I feel like it's a lot of information, and I want to kind of what's fresh in people's mind about the process part, maybe show them some examples of what the work actually looks like.
Sounds great.
Okay, so I'm going to shift you guys again over here. Boop. If I don't trip. Live disaster. Okay. Okay, so this is actually a.
Hold on, we're getting some feedback, but I don't know if that's. I mean,
I don't know what is happening.
Let's see. Sashka was unmuted, and I don't know if it was hers.
I'm gonna mute myself for 1 second.
No, I think you're okay. I think it was somebody else's. I think somebody else had two devices that were giving feedback, so I think we're good.
Okay, I just want to see if my volume goes up if I change the.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm having such a hard time hearing you. It's really awful. I apologize for the back and forth. Okay, so this piece here, if everyone can see me, is a solid piece of silk. can see that it is pretty long and wide. And it's one of my wider shawls. You can see the surface is pretty textured. It's a very subtle color, so not the brightest. And then this is the side where I'm placing all that kind of wool painterly on the surface and then merging it together.
So the side that you just, the more solid side, is that how felt on it as well? Or that's just the silk?
It
Like-
does, but it's only from what is actually being pulled through the silk weave itself.
Wow, yeah, so you're basically just putting all the wool on one side and then it kind of goes through versus like a scarf like this where it's on both sides.
It's on both sides, exactly.
Yeah. And it's so cool because it really shows like that texture that happens to the silk, which I think is also this beautiful aspect of it, right? And you get that like light reflection on that material. And so they really, it just, I think, shows the silk material as much as it shows the wool material.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use different weights of silk and they yield different textures, and then they also yield different kind of sheens. Those kind of where you're talking about the light catching the surface. So this style in itself, this is what I call my subtle silk work, and it definitely has a subtle sheen and a subtle texture to it. I'll show you this on me just so you can kind of get a feel for the
we
the
do have
size
a
and
question.
the width of the piece.
Gina, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Kathy's asking, was the piece sheer before you added the wool? So was that, how sheer was that silk?
The silk is see-through through the light. So with felting, anything I recommend for anyone who's a felter, that light is sort of your best friend for determining whether or not you can actually get the wool to work its way into the silk. And the more dense the weave of the fabric, the more work you're going to have to do to get them to actually merge together. So that is the, you know, if you're starting out in felting or you're experimenting, silk gauzes and silk chiffons are definitely the easiest. And then you can kind of move up into different weights and experiment through that as well. But everything that I use does have a, you know, where you can hold it up to the light and you can see through the weave at some point. So that is, for example, this is Bree, this is similar to the weight of that you have on, and Judy, the same
yeah.
for you.
I
But
actually
this-
have that scarf in another color, that same
Yeah.
style.
the ruffle. I think I made it for you
Yeah.
as like a super bright rust.
I'll
I remember you were
go
just like,
grab it. I'll go grab it.
you're like, I want contrast. So what's happening with this piece is that you can see here the texture is much more
Yeah.
dramatic than on the piece I just showed you.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see mine. It's like a
Yeah.
turquoise and then the red on the other side. And I love all of these, like you'll show, because you're bigger than me, but like folding them over and just letting that other colorway show. That's like
Yeah,
one of my favorite aspects.
What's important to me about the work is that it drapes. And so felting can become quite cumbersome the more it's felted or the heavier it is. So I work with really large pieces of silk. I did see someone had a question about the original size of the fabric.
Yeah, and
So
they were asking like the shawl
Mhm.
specifically, but
the pieces that I work with are 11 feet wide, or 11 feet long and 45 inches wide. So that's one shawl is that much silk.
wow.
And then what happens is, depending upon the amount of wool and the placement of the wool, the piece will actually shrink by 40 to 50%, depending upon those variations. So there's a lot in that, and including how much you fold the piece, which is what I was talking about earlier. If you are a felt maker and you're a light felt maker and you don't like to fold things very strongly, then you can use a smaller piece and you'll still have the size will be closer to its original, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what I love about these, like that style too, right? You can wear the ruffle up, wear it down, like there's
Yep.
just so many ways. And then like the way that you tie it, right? Like I can wear the scarf 20 different ways. And it's soft, like it's just, right? It doesn't feel heavy, even though it's like kind of big and has a bulk to it. It doesn't have a big weight to it, which I think is really nice.
It's important. I mean, no one wants to be uncomfortable. So I've been doing this a long time, and I do have people who continue to purchase them. So that's a good sign. Let me show you another style, actually kind of more geared toward, these are great for, I mean, Bree, you have yours on inside, Judy, you have yours on inside, and they, depending upon how cold you are, I wear these smaller ones, and even that medium width, I will wear that inside because I just run a little bit cold and I like to keep them on. If you are, there's different weights. So like this silk gauze is something that you can use, I would say, in every season other than summertime, because no one wants to be wearing wool around their neck in the summertime. So that's, kind of the sizes really dictate how warm they are. And then what also dictates the warmth is the type of silk that I'm using.
And like this one, like now I have it kind of twisted up, but I love to wear this like with like a blazer, kind of like in that like inside of a blazer, and then like roll it over the top. And it really then is more of that accessory than like a warmth kind of.
Yeah, it's sort of can be jewelry as well, I mean, for someone who likes to wear long necklaces and that kind of thing. Okay, so this piece here is, so back to kind of working in a lightweight.
Let's see, Joanne has a question. What do you recommend for someone who runs hot? So maybe you're about to show that.
Okay, so Joanne, I'm getting into kind of the lighter weights. This is for more transitional weather. So this piece here you can see is kind of a mix of color blocks. The surface, it is sheer. So it's completely, the air passes through. And it is versatile in the sense that you can wear it, something like this you can get away with going to an event in the summertime and kind of placing over your shoulders. It does give you a little bit of coverage that way, but also for just dressing up, kind of wearing on some plain clothes for a pop of color. You can see here that it just lays really lovely and drapes in the front. And then for actually keeping you warm or wrapping you around, it goes nicely once around, and then also can be tied a second and third time. And I have a customer of mine in Philadelphia, and she comes wearing this style like tied in a knot and a flower like right up against her face, and looks really great. So it's just up to kind of your personal, again, like what you can deal with around your neck in terms of the size and the width, and then also the weight. So this is the sheer horizontal style that I have, and you can see these. There's a few on Peters Valley. You could also see them on a model on my website. So there's kind of a way to see what they look like on, and then also the color variations in them. And I'll show you the next style in that weight.
And if you do have any questions about like any of the pieces on our site, or Gina, she probably has them and she can pull out the actual piece and like model it for you. So
everything that you see on both of the sites I have.
And you can put the link like right into the chat, might be easy so we know which one you're talking about, or we'll figure it out.
Okay, so you can see here, this again is a sheer style silk. So you can see through it, dyed. It's sort of like a smoky turquoise color.
Yeah,
you can see on this side again, so there's wool on this side where you can see that there's that nice color variation. And then on this side, you have just that texture. So this silk gauze actually is matte, so there is no sheen to it. Unlike say this, which has got that iridescence to it, which can be very pretty. But this is, again, back to Joanne's question, this is lightweight and drapes really beautifully on because what happens is because the wool is oriented vertically in this piece, it gathers up really narrowly and lays really nicely just in front, thrown on. And then you can also bring it in for warmth, but you see that the volume here can be collapsed if you just let it do its thing. Or you can open it up a little bit wider and really create kind of a more sculptural looking scarf. What's really awesome about wool and felt in general, I mean, the process, you can, I know everyone here is probably familiar with felt making to some degree. And so the thickness of it dictates the kind of structure it has, and you can build a house with it. So when you put a little bit on silk, it gives it a really beautiful kind of architecture that allows it to be way more sculptural than a piece of silk would be without it. You can see here that this volume is just once around by itself.
Yeah, this style is like, that's gonna be my next one. I love that.
Yeah, it's easy
And
to
yes,
wear. It's really
Deb
beautiful.
Melts, you need at least one of these scarves. You definitely do.
Yes.
I love mine. Did you see? I've got a couple.
I know. I'm such a sucker. But
I make about 26 styles, so you have options.
Oh, well then I'll just might as well take all.
We'll work out a deal. Okay, so moving, I'm sort of more focused on lighter weight things right now just because of the weather. You know, the style that Bree you're wearing is my medium width. I will show you the narrow version of that so you get a sense of the piece for what it is texturally. So I do make every style in 3 widths. So this is the most narrow again that I work, similar to that little ruffle style that I had on and that Bree showed you hers in. Judy, you're wearing the double. You're wearing kind of the wider version of the medium width in that ruffle size. So you can see here that this is that more dense silk, the texture of it. The pucker is a little bit more dramatic. This is a really gorgeous one on this side. You see all that beautiful puckering. And then this is for someone who's just not into ruffles or flounces. It's really easy, goes once around. You can tie it even like a man's tie if you want to, and can be worn in this weather where it's transitional. You keep it on inside. You can bundle yourself up if you wrap it around multiple times. And it just, the recommendation is let the scarf do its thing, because that drape is so important in the work that if you kind of just give it a little, it creates its own volume. So this is the narrow in that same style that Bree has on.
Mine actually has the silk at the bottom too.
Oh yeah, you know, I don't do any of those anymore.
Yeah.
They are, Karen, the scarves are not physically signed by hand, but I actually use a metal rivet. So each piece is marked by a signature that is my initials, and then is placed, my name is in a rim around it. So they do have a label. And when I first started, I used to number every piece on a tag that I would handwrite the number that you would get with each piece. And if you kept the tag, you would have the association with that number. But as things have evolved, I no longer, my tag ripper, who is my mom, has retired. So now I have them digitally printed. Thanks, Mom. Okay, so this is that same vertical turquoise scarf that I was just showing you. This is the widest version of that piece. So you can see here, there's about 5 bars of wool that run along the piece. And again, there's just wool on one side here. So I'll give you a little glimpse of this up close. You can see still sheer. And then this is the matte side with just the texture. And then this is the wool side. And what I do love about this shawl is that it is great for just about every event. You know, you can wear it dressy if you want, open. I really prefer it just gathered up in this kind of accordion. It drapes really nicely with like a little denim jacket. If you're going somewhere and you want to wear a lighter shirt underneath, bring a light jacket, and then you've got this, and you can kind of integrate this and use its width to kind of keep you warmer or colder, you know, to adjust your comfort level based upon how much it's open.
Oh God, sorry.
Is that your dog howling? I think I heard it this time.
Yeah, she sees something outside.
That's all right. The squirrels are at it. Spring.
Yeah. He just like perches on the edge of the couch and stares out the window.
All right, and then I will show you one more in the felt, and then we can talk about batik. So I don't know how we're doing on time,
We're
but
good.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the idea of painting. These pieces are the largest I work in the wearable size. They are definitely one of a kinds where with my scarf work, I can usually duplicate silk. Everything is one of a kind in the scarves, but I do remake colors and color combinations over in different styles and for kind of custom work. But these are, instead of using one solid piece of silk to create these, what I do is I actually am cutting up smaller pieces of hand-dyed silk, laying them down on the table, and then laying the wool down and basically working them together. And the wool itself is actually holding the piece together. So there's no sewing involved in these. It's just the use of wool as the tool to kind of bind and hold these smaller pieces of silk.
You're like, how do
So
you
this,
get it?
again, go ahead, you have a
It
question?
just seems like it would, like if you're putting the silk down on a piece of bubble, it would just want to like move around. Like, how do you get it to hold in place so perfectly? You're just good. You're just good at it.
I'm a like determined. and look, if you it's my aesthetic to have it look a certain way. You know, you can lay things down loosely and you'll have it'll yield in a different texture and result. So that's the kind of beauty to the felt process, is that everything can be adjusted and experimented. And the longer you do it, the more kind of things you learn from it. And after 17 years, I still have miles and miles of understanding to go. So I was never taught specifically how to felt. I was living in Italy and I was cleaning a studio in exchange for some studio space there, and was helping TA to screen printing in a weaving class. And there was a Finnish woman who was teaching a felt course to the students. And I audited the course and then just started experimenting on my own time after the class. And that is actually where I discovered doing Nuno myself. So it's been an evolution of me not knowing anything about felt making and just using my kind of skills as a trained textile and fine artist, and then learning as I've gone. And the degrees of the work, I see work that I've made for clients that they've had for 17 years, and it's completely different than my work now, and I could never ever remake what I used to make. So like everything, you can't find how you started. So I'll just show you guys this on. This can also be used in your home. I mean, it looks really gorgeous just sort of as a painting.
So Kathy says, if these needed to be hand washed in cold water, correct, you would not want the wool to shrink any further.
You can wash it in cold to room temperature water. You just don't want to use like a steaming hot water. I have shrunk this wool to the point where it is not going to just shrink like if you put it in water, again, back to that kind of degree of how much you're shrinking the wool down. I'm making it so that it's a sturdy piece. And so you really want to be gentle with it, but my work is so that it can be washed, it'll be fine. So just never put it in hot boiling water and never put it in the dryer, because you will get a reaction. and if you did shrink something beyond, I would take the piece back and honestly remake it for you, because it's just something that think people, people's husbands put stuff in things and people accidentally wash stuff in weird ways. And I really do stand behind the work. And so I'm available for remakes.
Judy's asking if there's a particular soap that you
I use Ecos laundry detergent. I buy it from Costco. I find that with a lot of soaps, actually, they leave the silk crunchy. So the crunchiness is actually from the soap residue on the silk and not the wool itself being irritating or itchy. It's like just that soap never rinsing out. And Ecos, I find with most natural based soaps, like even if you use a natural dishwasher detergent with your dishes, you find that you need to use more soap to get grease out. And so Ecos is the no Tide. No, Tide's bad. Okay, so I'll just show you this guy on. This is the other side of it. So you can see the one side is really graphic, and then this is a really gentle modeled kind of variation of the colors that are in here, but mostly chocolate brown on the other side. So you get a bit of solid.
That was just me commenting to Deb.
Just you. Just little old me. Okay, so you can get a sense that this is really the widest. Can you see me fully?
Yep.
Okay, so you get the widest coverage across the back here. And it is very much replacing not a winter coat, but if you're hanging outside and it's chilly, this is really an awesome.
It has like a jacket kind of look to it. Like I love that, right? In contrast, especially to those sheer shawls that you were showing us earlier. This one just feels more like that substantial jacket.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. It replaces what you would wear as a coat outside and just looks pretty awesome. I mean, it's a statement piece for sure. I actually market them as meditation blankets because I find that a lot of the time I live on the ground floor and I have a meditation practice, and I find that they're great for keeping you cozy and then cozy on the couch, or just when I'm sitting working. I started off with when I was sitting at my computer earlier, I was wearing a black and white one that I just have here in my studio. And it is the only thing that keeps me warm. And it's good that I make them. Okay, so if anyone has any other questions about specific felt stuff, I will actually show you on one of my throws, and then we'll move on to batik.
Cool.
So I'm just going to spin you around here because I need a little bit more room. Sorry, that was kind of fast. Hold on to your hats. Okay. Sip of water. So
There's I see that big roll of bubble at the top. I love that hanging from the ceiling.
The 48-inch wide. Okay, so you can see here, now we're getting into really large scale work. This piece is all white silk, and then the color you see is actually an ombre of wool that I've blended by hand, and then just you can see the back is slightly different, but still is mimicking the coloration of the front, but you can really see the wool, kind of the placement of the wool and a little bit more of the direction of the wool hair on this side. Mm. And this piece, these are the largest that I work. They are quite cumbersome to actually shrink down. And I've gotten into this, I probably about let's see, what year is it, 21? Probably the 2016, I started doing these big pieces, and they are they're the most painterly that I work, but they're also the most graphic that I work. So it really gives me the ability to explore a really huge surface area to kind of design the patterns with the silk, and then use the wool as a tool to hold all of that pattern design together. And I do a lot of, I work very improvisationally. I don't make small versions of things and then make large versions of things, but I do experiment testing and kind of work in these. I'll do like a week of, just spend some time when I have it to work out ideas that have been floating in my head before I spend a week actually laying one of these pieces out, because it does, as I said, you do learn from everything, but spending a week of time learning is not great when you're trying to run a business all the time. So that's the large scale. So you can get a good sense of the size of this, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to, take you guys back to my work table over here. So these frames are where I start batiking. So just a wood stretcher that I've coated in some nice tape that is washable. Learn that in screen printing, to coat all of your wood frames with tape that it's like white duct tape, I guess, like high-end duct tape. So what I do is I take white silk and then I stretch it with teeth pins or push pins, excuse me, onto this surface. And then I've got sort of a stretched canvas, if you will. And then I melt in an electric pot. I melt hot wax. So I use a combination of bee and soy wax because I used to use paraffin. Paraffin's super toxic, so don't want to be breathing in that at all. And the different waxes have different sticky qualities, so they create different crackle textures on the silk surfaces, and they also have different drying temperatures. And so there's, people who batik will, paraffin is kind of like the old school traditional way to use, but it's just not worth the fumes for me. So anyway, I use brushes. So there are different ways to get patterns, but I actually hand paint each mark that I'm making with batik, and then I direct dye with another brush by painting on the surface. Then that color dries, and then I go back to waxing and then over dye that, and usually do anywhere from 1 to 3 layers of wax depending upon the design, the type of silk that I'm using. Some silks will absorb more color than others before they're done taking color. So it's really just kind of one piece at a time. And then I usually have a square, and that square will range from 35 to 55 inches wide. And then what I do is, you can see here, this is sort of a piece that I have on. And what I do is I cut those up in, I have a few designs, some a little bit. I like to make things that are simple because the textile itself is so work intensive and so time consuming. I want to get the widest range of clothing and kind of the widest range of bodies to be able to fit into the clothing without too much structure. So they are all one size usually, and then vary in kind of lengths and fits depending upon the type of fabric that I'm using. So.
And are you doing batik? Is it all silk, or are you working on any other fibers besides silk?
I work on other fibers. I really love silk for the fluidity of the wax. So there's like this really, there's a point when so with batik, you have like a very small window, because what you need the wax to do is to be hot enough to actually penetrate the surface of and go through to create a barrier in the fiber itself. So the thicker the fabric, the heavier the fabric, then the more difficult that barrier is to kind of create. And so then you won't get the shapes that you want or the kind of cleanliness of the shapes. So I work with silk, but I also work with cotton and linen and hemp, and I've expanded. What I have on now is a really, this is a silk, a crepe de chine, sorry, brain stopped working for a second. And on top here is a sheer silk chiffon in black. They are finished with hand-dyed bias. So each piece has bias around each edge, and then on the inside, there's details. They're all sewn with really high quality sort of French seaming. Everything is hand washable. Some pieces you can put in the dryer. The beauty about a batiqued textile is that unlike printing, where the pattern will sit on the surface, this is actually through both sides. So the quality of what you're getting is, if you are into it, you know, and lucky enough to be able to buy them, then, you know, the idea is that you're really getting something that won't ever disintegrate or wash out or wear away as you kind of use it, which sometimes happens with just like dye color or printing.
Technical
question, Bree?
question. Yeah, I have like a technical question of like, is there the wax that you use, then it ultimately dissolves when you wash it? So do you have to use this? How does that work? Where does the wax go?
This is also where the variations of fabrics come in. So you have to, the wax needs to be melted back out. So it dries, and then after kind of the layers of dye are on the surface, it will start to like lift off a little bit on the edges, or sometimes there'll be cracking. Sometimes in batik, I'm sure everybody's seen batik, where it's like this super cracked, kind of muddled looking surface. Traditionally, in places like Indonesia, the wax is boiled off. So you stick it in a hot pot and you just cook it around, and the wax all floats to the top, and then you skim it. And then I use a combination of washing, because I want to get the dye off first. And then once the dye is kind of clear, I then actually take newsprint paper and I iron the wax out between layers of newsprint, which is traditionally how I was taught how to batik. And I find that it removes the most amount of wax from the piece so that it is not kind of still sticking in there. And it does take quite a bit of effort to get the wax out. You know, back in the 90s, people were just taking them to dry cleaners to get the wax out, but they have banned the chemical that people were using in the dry cleaners that's super toxic for people. So that is a good thing, but that was also like a way that people in Western culture would do batik and then just take it to the dry cleaner. So I'm there with my iron that's coated with wax. It's a real fire hazard. So in the theme of spring, this is a cotton hemp shirt. I could see that it's a really sort of little 3/4 sleeve. It's a nice kind of swing. Most of the work is two-sided. This is not reversible. The piece that I have on is, I'll show you some examples. But again, everything is finished really nicely with the detail. I'm a stickler for attention to detail here. So every little piece of bias is chosen for each area. And, you know, they are all sort of paintings. So this is a great piece. Most of these will fit up to an extra large. It's just a matter of what you are, like your style and your kind of your shoulder drape is really what determines how it looks on you. This is a version of what I have on.
Well, Deborah is asking on that one you just showed, why isn't the back the same as the front?
Because of the kind of the cost of the fabric. So this front part is from a batik. And this back part is a piece of hand-dyed fabric in the same color. So I'm hand dyeing this and I'm cutting it up and then I'm pairing it with the front. If I was to, so I usually only get 2 to 3 garments out of one of those squares that I'm creating. And so if I want to make one garment from it, no one would buy it because it would be outrageously expensive. And the shirts already range from about $230 up to the dresses are $620. So there's a range. Most of the tops are in the 300s, but I spend about a week making one piece of yardage, and then that has to be cut up and made into a few pieces. So that would be, that's kind of good question though. Yeah. So you get a sense for here.
Gina has to make a living, so she has to make, right? You have to figure out, like you're saying, like
Absolutely.
work that is a price point where you could sell it versus really going over the top, but then it's going to sit in your studio forever. So
yeah, and
you
there
have
is
to make those choices to, you know, when you're designing.
Yeah, and this is, you know, when you're using, a lot of, I'm sure if you've listened to talks, people who are artists talk about their love for process. And when you determine price points for things, a lot of the time our hourly wage is not included in those prices because there's just no way to get paid for the time that you spend working in a world where we are adjusted to a certain price to pay for things, you know, and there's a limit to it even for couture or high-end things. Like if you're of a small business or a single operation and you don't have that kind of recognition, then there's a ceiling. So you've got to learn, that's part of business, is learning where you can charge money because of your time and effort, and then where you lose money, you know, and what kind of, everybody needs a range. And so this piece has 2 pieces of batik on it. You can see here, it can be worn this way. And then it also can be flipped around. And this is the top that I have on again. So you can see that there's sheer here. This is actually a little bit different. It has 2 pieces of chiffon, so it's not as sheer. It looks quite sheer in this photograph, but it has a textured silk on this top. I don't know if you can kind of catch there's like a vertical crunchy kind of gathered silk there. Can you see that?
Just a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. It's too, the light is too bright. So there's a piece of this that I have on underneath, and then there's another layer of silk on top. So it gives you a little bit more coverage. I know women are, you know, people are shy about showing bra straps, or everybody has their own set of rules. So I usually say that these you're going to wear layered for the most part anyway, just because it's a loose fitting piece, and you may want to have on something underneath just for your own comfort. I mean, these feel like pajamas on, honestly. This is just super light and super airy.
And I love that balancing of like the solid pieces with the batik, because I think it makes the batik work stand out more. If it was all that, right, then that pattern, you kind of lose those individual marks. And I think that really highlights it in a nice way.
Yeah. And you can really see, I mean, if you were here in person, you could see that each brush stroke has kind of a texture to the surface of it. Like you could see where the wax, the brush marks, and kind of what's happening on it more in person. But I also, so these are the longer versions of the shirts that I'm making. So this is actually a 3/4 dress. It is reversible. This piece comes with a belt. So some of you who don't like the kind of really loose 1920s drop sack dress, this can be belted. So there is a sort of invisible side slit here that the belt can be placed inside, wrapped around your waist, and then used to gather. So for those who are more petite, I'm probably like a medium on top. And you can see that there's plenty of room in here for women who are blessed with more
I'd even say you're like a small, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, I'm in between. I'm like in a weird place where I can't really fit into small. You know,
I'll tell you what, I used to be a medium, and now that sizes have changed, I'm a small.
Yeah.
And I'm big on top, right? But I have like a small frame, but it's amazing how I haven't gotten any smaller as I've gotten older yet, but the sizes have changed.
Yeah.
And
Judy, the
Judy
piece
wants
that
to
I'm
know-
wearing is 310. The pieces that have 2 pieces of batik are either 330 or 360, depending. Everything is prices on the online. I also am willing to send people things with a return label. I know that buying clothes off the internet is really difficult, especially if you don't already own one of these. And I am totally willing to ship things to people if just with their trust that they are careful and try it on. And if they don't love it, then they can just return it. So I will also show you, moving on to the kind of next weight. I love this weight of silk. It is a raw silk. It's actually more like a knit. So I love like a good kind of open woven knit for summertime or kind of this more transitional weather. And the pattern you can see is fully on one side here. There is, you can see the variation in the painting. And then reverse it, it's just black, but can be worn on this side as well. Again, sewn with French, everything is French seamed together. And then
I had to mute someone. Sarah wants to know, where do you get the silk and where do you get the wool?
so the wool comes from, I have 3 companies that I work with, and over the years, some of it is, mostly it's imported, some of it is, my one dealer is in England, and then I have another dealer who is in Colorado, and another dealer who is in on Bainbridge Island out in Washington, and they really source from all over the world. So I'm not using local suppliers. Merino, I've always used a lot of people from Australia and European companies, and I will say that the color sensibility is something that is super important to me, and I have just found that the color sensibility of the people who are in Europe is really just outstanding, and so that is important to me. I usually get wool orders once every 18 months, so it's not something that I do on a large scale from that far away, but yeah, so the wool comes from all over the world, and then the fabric itself, most of it is woven in China, Thailand, and I use a dealer and importer out of California. So in the spirit of time, talking about using your time wisely, I also create clothing from the drop cloths that so I basically stretch I've stretched the piece out on the frame, and then I put the frame over an area, and for probably about a year I was putting it over towels and sheets, and I was creating all of these really lovely drop textured, splattered textured towels and sheets, and then decided that I needed to use that dye because of what was happening, or use the fabric down there. So I started laying down the same fabrics that I was batiking in, and then creating these really beautiful kind of one-of-a-kind painterly tops that for people who are maybe not into something so graphic, this is really great. This is a raw silk. It's a little heavier than the one I just showed you, so it's not sheer, but this is the most comfortable fabric. And you can see that how like soft it is. It literally is like wearing, I mean, I don't even know. If you don't own raw silk things, you need to find them.
Yeah, raw
in the
silk is
world.
the best.
Yeah. It's just, it feels really good. So again, I can actually show you guys one of these styles on if you want to see what these
Sure.
tops
I
look
love
like,
that too. I
because-
think that's so smart. Like art, you always find artists like they started this one thing, so they're like, oh, yeah, I had all these leftovers, or I was making this, waste, and it's just that resourcefulness of like it's a combination of being resourceful and then also being creative, right? And having
Yeah.
that idea to go, oh wait, there's something here. Like this is
Yeah.
fun. I'm into this.
And I think most artists don't throw anything away. So
Yeah.
if you guys like see these, I was talking about all my plastic drawers. So those drawers that are underneath the wool over there all contain certain sizes of smaller tear offs of
Mhm.
silk that is, I use to create those really graphic pieces and my large scale throws. So nothing gets wasted. And then depending upon what drawer, the sizes kind of diminish into tiny little pieces of random scraps. So everything eventually gets used. And it's like you're talking, Brie, what you're talking about is like you will think about something or have an idea and then go to this thing that you have and use it, So
Yeah.
I'm just
yeah.
going to step off camera for a second and then just show you guys
Yeah.
what one of these looks like on. So you can see it's not all crop tops.
No, but it's so true, right? I have those collections or like the sample pieces or the different things. And like, I had a box with little parts from like 2 years ago for something that I pulled out a couple weeks ago. And I was like, ooh, maybe I can use this. I'm not using it yet. It hasn't worked, but we all kind of have those. And
Yeah, everything gets used. So this has more of a boat neck.
Mhm.
So a little bit more collarbone here, but a lot more coverage up in the front, not such a scoop as the last piece. There is more structure to the shirt. It's a 3/4 sleeve. And again, this piece is because it doesn't have it's not as wide as the other silk shirt. So I would say that if you're kind of a large, you would fit in this shirt. It's not going to be as loose, but it won't fit up to an extra large. And then obviously, depending upon your chest size, it will be a little bit, the shape will change in the front a little bit, but you can see that it has just a really nice drape to it and is cute and casual.
And like Karen's saying, she thinks that the solid color really sets off the fabric, right? And that it's like a frame for a painting, not just the compromise for price. So exactly, I exactly agree with that.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, it's fun for me to make. It's back to that kind of painterly idea where it's like, what is this going to look like together once it's sewn? Because I hand cut everything and then I choose all the colors and the placement of all the bias and all of that. And it's really, it just, there's so much thought that goes into the garment that we don't have in most of our daily purchases, that it is really a piece of art that you're wearing.
Well, it's like
I wanna
that
show you my new-
composition, right? Like when you think of making a painting and you're thinking about composition and like, again, like those sizes, right? And like you're saying with the bias is like this little
Mhm.
extra thing, but it can be so impactful depending on how you use it, right? And do you want a contrasting color or, something that matches more, and all of those decisions, like there's just so many things to think about, just like the shape, the size, the color.
Yeah,
all of it.
absolutely. And the color against the face, especially with my scarves, how dramatically different color affects what we look like. And, those little details can throw something off or make something really, really make you really stand out. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this new
Yes.
shirt. So I'm going to just take it off the mannequin and show you on so I can give you an
Sure.
idea of what I've been working on for spring.
Yeah, I love
this
that
is like the
neckline.
most structured piece that I've designed and am working to have done. It is
Oh yeah.
got
Love that.
a really nice kind of drape in front. It has this mock
Mhm.
collar here. So this piece is almost like a collar, but it is this is a little bit thicker here. So it gives you this really nice structure, and then kind of has the arms itself are nice and wide, but still give you that little cap sleeve.
Mhm.
And then you can see that it is finished. Again, back to what we're talking about, details. Everything is finished inside and out. And then it does have a little side vent.
Yes. I love this. So
Which is
what
nice.
material is this?
This is a linen and hemp.
Nice.
And then the back is, you can see, gives you a little bit more coverage down below.
Oh my God, this
And then
is
it
so
has a
my
nice
kind of
kind of
shirt.
high
That is
collar
not,
here.
I know that that is not my color, but that shirt, that style, I need that. So when you
Yeah,
have other colors, I love that. I like the neck. Oh, I love it.
yeah, there's,
Love it.
it's been, so the sample I've had for about a year, and obviously with just sort of the stop on shows, you know, I've been just holding off on going back into producing garments, and I'm just really excited because you know, it's like you get momentum when you work. Like when you start doing things, you learn from them, and then ideas click, and then you move on to the next thing. And what the grateful part of being in my studio for a full year is, you know, I've been trying to balance working between two mediums. So batik takes one energy, and then felting takes another energy, and they have influenced each other, the patterning and the color. And then when I'm batiking, I'm thinking, oh, this would be awesome in a throw, or, you know, this idea. And then, you know, I have customers who are like, I can't wait until you start integrating your batik fabric into your felting. And, you know, it's just nice that it's nice to kind of go between different things and then use all of what the inspirations that they kind of feed into each other. So yeah, I'm excited just about kind of having a more structured garment, you know, because
Yeah.
not everyone has the same style or the same bodies. And so it's kind of nice to be able to expand. You can see here, I'm going to try this one on for you too. This is the younger crop top that is for people who like high-waisted jeans, or, you know, the younger women in your life who are still showing midriff. But it is, again, back to kind of using all of the fabric. So I can only get one of these shirts out of one of those pieces that I'm making.
Right.
So I have to be able to squeeze another garment out of that same yardage to make it worth
But
the time.
and it'll be interesting to see, like, as you continue with this style, like, would you piece in other solids and stuff like you do for the other ones?
Yeah, I am for fall, I'm working on just like a classic a dress shirt, like a silk dress shirt, and I'm really excited about using the crepe de chine and making that into more of like a classic button down, because I just feel like the working of where you can place the batik fabric with solid silk is, it's just really exciting. So
Yeah.
I'm headed in that direction, and we'll see where the rest of the kind of the next couple months take me. Excuse me for a second.
Yeah, I love that.
We do have a question from Facebook Live, actually. Do you have any long sleeve shirts?
So this style, this can come in like a classic tee, so a little bit longer. This is a drop sleeve here, so you can see that like what I'm wearing is a kimono style shirt, so there is no placement for a sleeve hole. So a drop sleeve is something that comes off of the shoulder, and then the arm sleeve part is attached a little bit lower. So this comes in a t-shirt style. This is kind of a mid elbow, and then I also make this in a long sleeve as well. So this style, I don't have any currently, just because I started doing this for spring, but it is something that can be made if there's a pattern of batik that you like, and then, you know, like I said, anything can be made. So for the future fall, again, I guess look forward. And also the silk dress shirt that I was talking about will be a full long sleeve shirt. So this is kind of the shorter, fun version of that same material that I was just working with, but you can see that the structure is obviously totally different in the scoop neck, and this is just a much simpler design. The piece that I was wearing, I want to just show you guys the details. So this is inside out. This is the collar,
Oh, nice.
backed with the same hand-dyed fabric that was on the back of the shirt, sewn with French seams. This is the lining of the shirt.
Nice.
And then this is also a detail kind of on the back inside of the collar. So
Yeah, I mean, you'll have this, right? I have not a lot of handmade. Well, I've made my own clothes, not fancy like that, right? But like, you know, you're investing in a piece like that, you will have it forever. Forever. You know, I've like got this great handmade skirt that I bought at a craft show probably 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it looks just as good. You know, I don't wear it that much because it's dressy,
Sure.
but it looks like it's brand new.
yeah,
So the quality is really there and they're just made to last.
absolutely. And that's what you're paying for. You're paying for something that is made by hand with intention and of quality, so that you know that it's going to be around, you know. So,
And part of that is because you wouldn't settle for putting your name behind something, putting something out into the world that isn't right of like the highest standard that you can make, because
absolutely. And I buy
Sure.
what I, you know, we all have our kind of high-low closets where it's like you've got your things that you buy because you need to them and they wear out and all of that, but you also have your pieces that you spend a lot of money on and you don't wear them every day or every week, but when you wear them, you feel amazing in them and you know where they've come from or there's a connection to it. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I used to have what I call like a dress problem. I was always buying these like handmade dresses, like in, you know, I'd go into like a really nice store here in Chicago and wind up, I have a closet full of dresses to go to events, you know?
Yeah.
So
Joanne wants to know, do you do custom work for size purposes?
yeah, absolutely. The obviously working over Zoom is a little bit more difficult, just because what I would do is have you try on what I am making and then adjust it from there. But, you know, something can be worked from your measurements as well, because they are flat patterns. So if you know your measurements and you know what styles you like, things can be adjusted from that sense. It would be preferably for me to be able to, you know, adjust a garment on you if you were trying it on, but yeah, anything is possible.
And I know it's 20 after 12 already.
Oh,
But
wow.
we just couldn't stop because it was so great. So
Sorry.
if anybody, no, if anybody else has questions, please put them in the chat. And
There
then
is
go ahead.
sorry, Brand, there's just a follow-up question from Facebook. If someone did want a custom piece, best way for them to contact you?
Email. So
Sorry, I think
info at
I wasn't sure if I could.
ginapannorfi.com. That anything you can find me, you can find the link to my email on my website. So my website is just my name, and Bree also has the link probably on you can find it through Peters Valley, or you can Google my name and you can find my email that way. So you can also call me. I mean, I'm fine, totally comfortable talking on the phone. Just no texts at 6 a.m. please.
I have a
And at
quick
6 a.m.
question.
Chicago time.
Do you do all the sewing yourself?
I don't. I have a woman in Chicago who she is an artist in her own right, and silk is a extremely fussy fabric to work with. And so I have, thank you, Carol, I have been able to give control over to her because I want that quality to be there, and there is just nothing comparable to somebody who knows what they're doing. So
Yeah, I think it's such a smart business decision to know, like, and again, it's like knowing where you want to put your time and energy and where somebody can do something better than you that ultimately, right, is going to give you that better quality product.
Yeah.
Like it's smart. Yeah.
I would never get anything made. I mean, it's really like the level of time, again, that goes into everything that I'm making, from hand dyeing everything to hand felting everything. I mean, tradition and quality are what my work is about, but it's just at some point there's just not enough hours in the day, and you've got to delegate responsibility.
Right.
So if you're fortunate enough to find somebody in your community who you can also help support, then that's another way to build cottage, a small artisanal cottage community. And I am more than happy to pay someone who's got skills that I don't have.
Yeah. I mean, but it's like a jeweler, right? If I have a series where the work has cast parts,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do the casting myself,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to have somebody. And I think I think a lot about this, like, kind of in America, the way I call it like the ecosystem, where I think it's awesome when studio artists can employ other artists, right, and keep it in America. Because I think what we're finding now, and especially when we go to a lot of these like hip craft shows, is that it's people that are designing and then they're having it made overseas because the labor's less expensive, right? And so I love these like partnerships that are here where we are. I think it's really important. And so
Yeah.
awesome.
And it's also about what we're willing to pay for. So,
Yeah, true. Well, does anybody else have questions? We will send you a follow-up email with the link to the collection and the video on YouTube. If you did come in late and want to just get caught up right now, it will be on our Facebook page because it's Facebook Live. So it'll be like a post on our Facebook page. So thank you all for joining us. This was awesome.
Thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate your
See
time.
you, Gina. Good to see you.
Good to
And,
see you, Judy.
We have 2 more weeks of this. So next week we have Kimberly Camp, who makes these incredible like art dolls. That's going to be a really interesting conversation. And then the week after that is Tara Locklear, who makes skateboard jewelry. So 2 more very different women. So we're looking
Awesome.
forward to them. But thank you again, everyone. Oh, Kimberly's on. Hi, Kimberly. We look forward to having you next week. All right, cool. So we'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We would like to thank our sponsors for making programs like this possible. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to receive more like it in the future.